So let's go back to the reading. I submit to you that these are the results of living in a capitalist system, and that grinds people down and denies them housing, medical care, human dignity, and a say in their government. These are the results of white supremacy pushing people to the margins, excluding them, disrespecting them, and treating their bodies as disposable. Once again, we don't have a white supremacist society. We have a satanic elitist society. We have an occultocracy. An occultocracy, meaning rule by the occult, rule by the hidden elite. And you know what, folks? If you don't believe me, take it right from their mouth, right from their words. Go watch the interviews that I talked about in Demystifying the Occult Part 2, Satanism and the Dark Occult. An interview with Anton LaVey's former grandson. I don't even know if he is not married to Zena LaVey anymore, but Nicholas Schreck was interviewed on cable access by a white supremacist, by the way, who asked him, what would the world look like if you, as Satanists, were in control of it? What would you do differently? And he said, oh, no, you quite misunderstand. We already are in control. We want the world more radically transformed into our vision of what it should be and look like. But make no mistake, we already are in control of it. We are just going to tighten and refine our control of the world. That was Nicholas Schreck's answer to Tom Metzer in that interview that I gave in that presentation. Go back and watch it again. Maybe we'll play it, to show people, hey, here's how it really works. These people are all too comfortable in telling you how they operate from the shadows. So he's trying to put this, saying it's to blame by capitalism and white supremacy. And these are just divide and conquer tactics, ladies and gentlemen. They're not going to teach you who's really in the realm of true elitist power. You want to learn that? Go read Tragedy and Hope by Carol Quigley. Then you'll know who's really in power. And he says the exact same thing that I say from having been involved in it at a low. I was involved in it at a low level. Carol Quigley was involved in it at a high level. And we both say the same exact things. It's a complex, interconnected network of people who know all of the workings of the human mind, human psychology, and know how to manipulate it. They're master manipulators of psychology. Same exact thing he says I've been saying for years. He wrote that book almost over 100 years ago, I think. Okay? And then what does he say about that it is like a cult? It is like a religious group, a secret society, however you want to look at it. And it has no name. Well, I've said it a million times here on What on Earth is Happening. It is a cult with no name. If you think they call themselves the Illuminati, you have drunk shallowly from the Pierian Spring. First of all, that word is a ridiculous word to use in relation to these psychopaths. They are not illuminates of anything. I'm a member of the Illuminati. I'm an illuminated one. And when you are enlightened, there should be no ego involved and no false hubris involved in saying that you are. I am aware of what's taking place in the world truly, from a perspective of true and complete knowledge. Okay? And I am not afraid to say that. I'm not going to tell people I don't know anything. I know quite a bit. And I've put out quite a bit of my knowledge. Okay? So Quigley was telling people this is ultimately a secret society. He referred to it, to give it a name, as the Anglo-American establishment. And he also referred to it as the Society of the Elect, meaning the society of the ones who are in control. They have elected themselves to those positions of power and influence, and they place point men and women in positions of great power and influence in our society. So for lack of better terms, he himself said, I'm going to call them either the Anglo-American establishment or the Society of the Elect for the purposes of my writings. I have called them the occult controllers, the occult ruling class, the mind controllers, okay, the social engineers. I've called them the dark occult. I've called them the darkly illuminated ones, or the dark Illuminati. I've called them the cult of the black sun. I think that's, for me, the perfect name for these people, because they are dark illuminists using the sun as symbolism in a lot of their works. But it is not the true light. It is not the true light of true spirituality and enlightenment. It is the false light of the dark sun. So I like the name the Black Sun Order, the cult of the Black Sun. It doesn't matter what you call them, folks. Their methodologies matter. How they go about entrancing people and putting them under their thumb psychologically, and ultimately then own their behavior as a result of that. That matters. A name is just that. It's just a label. So don't get too hung up on names. And understand they use the dialectic of capitalism versus socialism, black versus white, Republican versus Democrat. They'll use any dialectic that serves their agenda and gets people fighting each other instead of them. They don't care what dialectics they have people fighting over. They're all too happy to provide the distraction of divide and conquer. So let's continue. I know I'm jumping in here a lot. I'm going to try to just read straight. But when he says something that's blatantly wrong, I'm going to correct it. Equally important to remember, disabled and mentally ill people are frequently killed by police officers not trained to recognize and react to disabilities and mental health crises. Some of the people we picture as, quote, violent offenders are often people struggling with unrelated mental illness, often due to economic hardships. Very frequently, the officers sent to, quote, protect the community, unquote, escalate this crisis and ultimately wound or kill the person. Your community was not made safer by police violence. A sick member of your community was killed because it was cheaper than treating them. Are you extremely confident you'll never get sick one day too? Exactly. The police do this all the time as a matter of course. So let's go back to the reading. Wrestle with this for a minute. If all of someone's material needs were met and all the members of their community were fed, clothed, housed, and dignified, would they need to join a gang? I personally agree with that. And there's no reason we cannot do that without the government or police. Why would they need to risk their lives selling drugs or breaking into buildings? If mental health care was free and was not stigmatized, how many lives would that save? Again, he gets now into socialized health care, which is basically conscription. You cannot demand that someone else treat somebody. That's conscription. Okay? So I don't agree with socializing anything, because you're basically giving that to the government to control and distribute, and then you're conscripting people through theft of taxation and or outright physical conscription. I don't believe in drafts or conscription for anyone. That's taking choice away from someone. If someone wants to operate privately, they should have the right to do that. You want to join a collective of people voluntarily and then do that work pro bono, you do that as free individuals as well. When the government gets involved, that's when it becomes slavery. That's why I don't believe in the government mandating anything. They don't have the right to exist, let alone mandate anything. Would there still be a few bad actors in the world? Sure, probably. What's my solution for them? You're no doubt asking. I'll tell you what. Generational poverty, food insecurity, houselessness, and for-profit medical care are all problems that can be solved in our lifetimes by rejecting the dehumanizing meat grinder of capitalism and white supremacy. Folks, it's not just capitalism or white supremacy. It's the way that the ruling elite have structured the entire society. And it's not just here. That happens in other places where there are different systems in place. The elite occult ruling class wants there to be divisions amongst the people in class status. That is what keeps people fighting amongst them and not looking at who the real enemy is. It would happen in any other form of financial structure. Okay? Ultimately, yes, we need to get away from any form of money, because we have to come up to such a level of consciousness that we understand we are all one family. Until the world is at that level of consciousness, that would not obviate or remove property. All rights are ultimately property rights. It would still mean that you would own private property and somebody would not just have the right to just barge into your home or steal your computer or take all your books or steal your food. It means we would structure the world such that we would care that everyone's basic needs as a human being are met and wouldn't allow a structure of finance and money to dictate who are the haves and then other people must become the have-nots and go without basic necessities. But I don't call that capitalism. And I don't say that the solution is socialism. The solution is consciousness. The solution is not the government mandating who needs what and then deciding we're going to provide it in this way through theft, which is what taxation is, through violence, which is what policing is, and that's what taxation is. It's ultimately done through violence and the threat of violence, which is called duress. No, it would just say we need to come up to this level of consciousness and the people have to do that. And if they don't do it, it doesn't get done. This is what people are afraid of, folks. The chaos that might break out if people are left to their own devices. Well, what's worse, people being controlled and enslaved or people left to their own devices and there may be some chaotic stuff? Happened. I talked about it last week. It would always be preferable for even violent gangs to come out and take over society because no one would believe that they have the right to rule them. Now we have a violent gang running society called the police, run by the politicians and ultimately by the dark occultists, but everybody believes they have the right and authority to rule them. You think that's not infinitely more dangerous? They have gotten people to covertly believe that they are the rulers of society and have the right to do this violence unto other people. And people believe this horse shit. That's an infinitely more dangerous problem. The belief in authority. And then monopolizing a gang to do violence, calling themselves the police, that would be infinitely more dangerous than just having some violent street gangs take over. No one would think they have the right to rule. And then they'd step up and eventually stop them through defensive force, including deadly force, which would be their inherent right to do so. It's already our inherent right to do so. People just haven't recognized that fact. You see. Continuing. Once that's done, we can work together. We can work on the edge cases together with clearer hearts not clouded by a corrupt system. Again, he makes some points about, good points about abolishing the police, but then he goes off on tangent sidetracks because he doesn't have enough knowledge. If this person understood the world of the occult and what it really does, what it really is, not what Hollywood wants to make you think that it is, what it really is, and who's really running things, he wouldn't be worried about the dialectic between capitalism and any other form of finance. And he certainly wouldn't be advocating for socialism. All right? Continuing. Police abolition is closely related to the idea of prison abolition and the entire concept of banishing the carceral state. In other words, that which does the incarceration. Meaning creating a society focused on reconciliation and restorative justice instead of punishment, pain, and suffering. A system that sees people in crisis as humans, not monsters. People who want to abolish the police typically also want to abolish prisons and get the same questions get asked. What about the bad guys? Where do we put them? I bring this up because abolitionists don't want to simply replace cops with armed social workers or prisons with casual detention centers full of puffy leather couches and PlayStations. We imagine a world not divided into good guys and bad guys, but rather a world where people's needs are met and those in crisis receive care, not dehumanization. I agree with this to a large extent. The only part I don't agree with is that there should never be punishment for bad behavior. And I think the punishment should be immediate. Where if you work yourself into a state of consciousness or a mentality or a psychology where you think you have the right somehow to harm someone else, you should be prepared to accept the negative physical consequences from other free beings. Let me just say that again unequivocally. I believe in the abolition of the police. I know it's the only moral position. I believe in the abolition of all prisons. I've said this from day one on What on Earth is Happening. I think that's the only moral position. I don't believe anybody should be kept caged. Okay? I don't think those are solutions to people who want to take other people's rights or property away. However, I do believe in vicious, immediate response to violence. Let me say that again in no unequivocal terms. And let me say this. If you think this is not a spiritual understanding and a high-level spiritually aware statement, you aren't awake. You don't understand what inherent rights are. And I'm not saying everybody has to take this approach, but I'm saying if the approach is taken, it would be well within the inherent rights of every human being. If someone accosts me on the street and starts wailing on me for no reason, I have every right to physically annihilate that person, no matter what uniform they're wearing. If somebody accosts me on the street and tries to steal my property, I have every right to physically annihilate that being, no matter what uniform they're wearing. Whether they're in plain street clothes, whether they're in the uniform of the state, or whether they're buck naked. It would not matter. Okay? People have to understand self-defense, and we need to be a society that enshrines self-defense as an inherent natural right and uses it so frequently that when it is used justly, somebody goes, good for that person. They exercise their right against a thug. And ultimately, it doesn't matter why the thug became the thug. I agree we should address all of those concerns, and we should have help for people like that. But if they've moved it from the place of being fucked up in the mind so much that then their behaviors result in them accosting, taking away rights from other people, stealing property from other people, whatever happens to them happens. Hardcore cold. I'll look at somebody right in the face and tell them that. Because they have no right to conduct violence on other people, and other people inherently have the right to defend themselves up to and including deadly force. I don't play games with people on the street if they accost me. I'm not playing games with them. Just a few months ago, right near in my neighborhood, a couple of blocks from where I'm sitting, two guys got in an argument. One guy thought he has the right to punch this other guy in the mouth, hits him in the jaw, knocks him out, falls backwards, hits the back of his skull on the occipital protuberance on the concrete, dead. Dead. Over some stupid fucking argument. Okay? You wield physical force against me without right. I'm going to take it up to, very quickly escalate it up to deadly force. Because you have no right to do so. You have no right to put another human being in a position where they could potentially die. And I do not know where the violence would stop. That's why I'm going to stop it completely. And totally. And guess what? Yes, that's your right. That is my right and yours. It doesn't matter what the government says. That's a human right. Anywhere on earth. In any that is currently being immorally ruled by any government. That's a human right. So I guess I just triggered all my European buddies and gals out there, right? You're all triggered because this right of self-defense has been conditioned out of you like a good little pet, right? I'm a violent American because I just stated that that's my right. No, I understand it. And you don't. That's the fact of the matter. That's the point of fact matter of reality, boys and girls. Okay? So if you're not there yet, go back in the podcast and listen from number 1 and maybe you'll get there. All right? Doesn't take anything away from the truth about what I just said. Said if you're triggered or offended by it, get as offended as you like. It's still true. Continuing. Let's move forward. Here Here is legendary activist and thinker Angela Y. Davis, putting it better than I ever could. An abolitionist approach that seeks to answer questions such as these would require us to imagine a constellation of alternative strategies and institutions, with the ultimate aim of removing the prison from the social and ideological landscapes of our society. I couldn't agree more. The idea of a prison is inherently immoral, and it teaches people nothing in society. It takes the people who are bad actors among us and sequesters them from us as everyday society, so that we cannot see the consequences of what our own failure to teach morality has caused in our environment. That's why I said from day one, abolish all prisons and put all of those violent people back into the society that created them and let them deal with them. Then people will start looking at causal factors in mind and in spirituality. Why do these people become this way? Why do we have so many of them? Why are they willing to act the way that they are willing to act? And it's, you know whose responsibility it is? It's all the people out in the world. It's your failure. You're responsible for it. It's your failure to teach morality to your children and to everybody else. You have failed at that task. I have done that task. I am not a failure at that task. You who have not done that are a failure at that task. And yes, there is blame to be laid. Yes, there is such a thing as blame. Yes, there is moral culpability, and yes, there are people to blame for that failure. And most of the people out there, even the people who listen to this show on a weekly basis, you are the one who failed at that task. I don't care about ratings. I'm here to hit you with hard truth. And that's the hard truth of the matter. I don't care if you get offended and shut the show off and never listen to an episode again. Not my problem. I'm fulfilling my dharmic work, and that's your karma that you've taken and done nothing with. And you will be held accountable. In other words, we should not be looking for prison-like substitutes for the prison, such as house arrest safeguarded by electronic surveillance bracelets. Rather, positing decarceration as our overarching strategy, we would try to envision a continuum of alternatives to imprisonment demilitarization of schools. She should have a comma there instead of a dash. I'll fix that. Revitalizing revitalization of education at all levels, a health system that provides free physical and mental care to all. Again, that's where I would diverge in that, because if it's voluntary, fine. But you cannot conscript people to provide health care. You know, you cannot tell them, and how they want to work it is steal from everybody and make the government pay for those services. That's theft. That's immoral. All socialization of healthcare is immoral. You cannot conscript doctors, and you cannot keep people in duress through taxation. Either people get it done voluntarily or it doesn't get done. That's the level of consciousness you have to get to. If people don't pave the road doesn't get paved. If food isn't grown, food doesn't get grown. If we don't teach people morality, they grow up into bad people. That's it. All the failure has to be placed squarely upon the individual and the community for not doing those things. If you don't take your trash out of your environment, you have a filthy environment. If you don't clean your house, you got a filthy house. If you don't clean your dinner plate, you eat off a dirty dinner plate the next night. Take personal responsibility for what needs to be done and do it. Don't say we need to have free this and that and that. No, what you're saying is steal from everybody and or conscript doctors. Let's be honest, that's the violence that you're talking about enacting. It's not a right. It's not a right. I don't want to make the show about that, but they hammer this in this article, and I'm going to point out where things are false or immoral. They don't have all the answers. They've drunk shallowly from the Pierian Spring. Whoever wrote this, if you can prove you wrote this, get in touch with me. I'll help you get mentored into total enlightenment. Okay? And yeah, I can make that claim with no false hubris. I'll mentor you through my material into getting completely awake so that you understand what rights are. This is still written from a perspective of someone that doesn't know the definition of a right and has some solutions correct, and then some solutions that they envision would require duress and violence and would not be voluntary. So I'm going to point that out. Continuing. Mental health care to all, a justice system based on reparation and reconciliation rather than retribution and vengeance. I'm not telling you I have the blueprint for a beautiful new world. What I'm telling you is that the system we have right now is broken beyond repair, and that it's time to consider new ways of doing community together. I fully agree with that statement. Those new ways need to be negotiated by members of those communities, particularly Black, Indigenous, disabled, houseless, citizens of color historically shoved into the margins of society. Instead of letting Fox News fill your head with nightmares about Hispanic gangs and the Hispanic community, ask the Hispanic community what they need to thrive. Instead of letting racist politicians scaremonger about pro-Black demonstrators, ask the Black community what they need to meet the needs of the most vulnerable. If you truly desire safety, ask not what your most vulnerable can do for the community, ask what the community can do for the most vulnerable. A world with fewer bastards is possible. If you take only one thing away from this essay, I hope it's this: do not talk to cops. But if you take only two things away, I hope the second one is that it is possible to imagine a different world where unarmed Black people, Indigenous people, poor people, disabled people, and people of color are not routinely gunned down by unaccountable police officers. And let me tell you something, folks. I agree with that, but it is not the totality of what's going on with the police. This is not about race. Yes, races of non-white people are actually more likely to be harmed or killed in a police interaction, but it's not just them. White people are killed by police just as violently as Black people, Indigenous people. It does not matter. This is not a matter of race and never has been. This is a matter of the belief in authority. Let me say that unequivocally again for those who are a little slow on the uptake. It's not a matter of race. It's a matter of the belief in authority. So you go out and ask all of those protesters out there protesting the George Floyd incident, do you think all government should be abolished? Or do you think these people actually have the moral right to exist and organize society in the way they organize it? I guarantee you every one of them, almost bar none, with the exception of a tiny percentile, maybe 1 or 2%, are going to say, oh no, we are not suggesting getting rid of all government. We still want to have government, but we want to be the ones with the reins of power of government in our hands. We want it to work for our needs, right? They don't want to abolish government. They want to restructure policing and government into something that is akin to what they want in their mindset. And I don't care what color you are, that makes you immoral. That makes you a supporter of duress and slavery. Doesn't matter what color you are. I don't care if white people advocate for that. I don't care if Black people advocate for that. I don't care if Asian people. I don't care if Indigenous Americans. I don't care if South Americans, any Latino people advocate for that. It matters not. Okay? It's still immoral. It's still an immoral position. You are condoning violence and slavery, which makes you a bad person if you condone it. Go all the way to enlightenment. Don't stop halfway or a quarter of the way. Understand that government is slavery and always has been slavery. They diffuse the authority from a king or ruler or a representative of God on earth to, we're just going to have an oligarchical ruling class. It's just a few people, but they're called government and they have authority, just like the king or the pharaoh had authority in the ancient world. It's no new different. The New World Order is the Old World Order with different labels. That's all it is. Different euphemized labels. We're going to euphemize this, give it a nice little euphemistic label, put that euphemism out there for the dumb public to buy into, and repeat it over and over and over again. And then the public grasps onto it and says, oh yeah, this is completely different. No, it's the same shit on a platter. They just put a little sprig of parsley next to the big glop of shit. That's all that happened, folks. They dressed it up and you swallowed it. All right? That's what happened. It doesn't have to be this way. Yes, it requires a leap of faith into community models that might feel uncomfortable, but I ask you, when you see a man dying in the street, begging for a breath, don't you want to help? Don't you want to leap away from that world? When you see a mother or daughter shot to death, sleeping in their beds, don't you want to leap away from that world? When you see a 12-year-old boy executed in a public park for the crime of playing with a toy, Jesus fucking Christ, how can you really just stand there and think this is normal? And to any cops who made it this far down, is this really the world you want to live in? Aren't you tired of the trauma? Aren't you tired of the soul sickness inherent to the badge? Let me tell you something. They become more soul sick than all the people who are traumatized and victimized by violence out there in society. That's why they're largely brain dead and soul dead, these cops. That's why you guys are so brain damaged and soul damaged. That's why you can't think clearly. That's why you're not smart people. I don't care what your IQ is. You're not holistically intelligent. Most cops are dumb. Most cops are dumb people. I don't care what you could even do on a math test. That doesn't make you truly smart or truly intelligent. You're not holistically intelligent. You can't envision what true solutions would be from a causal factor perspective. That's why you don't have total heuristic, big picture thinking. You're locked into the left brain of action only. You can't see the solutions. You have no imagination. That's largely right brain capacity. You're not intelligent. You're not nearly as intelligent as you think you are. You're actually quite dumb. And I'll say it right to your face. You are not holistically intelligent people, regardless of what you can score on an IQ test. That is an intellect quotient, not an intelligence quotient. I have a very high intellect as well. I have a 147 intellect quotient. That's genius level. So what? So fucking what? You think that matters? But guess what? If you came up with something that could truly gauge holistic intelligence, I would score just as high because I'm holistically intelligent. I'm not just intellectually intelligent. And most cops, you are absolute, complete, inept, backwards, dumb people when it comes to holistic intelligence. And get as offended about it as you like. It's true. It's true no matter what you say. And guess what? So are most of the people coming up with so-called solutions. You're not holistically intelligent because you haven't taken in enough information to change your brain into truly firing in both hemispheres equally to make yourself holistically intelligent. And I'm not here to take you by the hand and pander to your delicate sensibilities about it. That was the Mark Passio on show number 1. That's what I was doing then. And I've said it before, folks, and I'm going to say it again. That guy is gone. That was a persona. I was acting in the capacity of putting out a nicer persona than my real personality, which is very abrasive, for the purpose of getting people to listen to go into the deeper episodes. Now, there's no more chewing your baby food before I spoon feed it to you. It's not happening. We're in war. This is war now. We are at war. If you haven't recognized that what's going on around us in our society is war, I don't know what to tell you. I just don't know what to tell you. And if you think that the time is now to baby spoon potential soldiers in an information war, you're nuts. We are in the trenches being bombarded and have to shoot back at the enemy and put this information out there. And I did it. That way I baby spoon fed it to people through like 150 fucking episodes, and I'm not doing it anymore. At least that long, maybe longer. That persona is over. All right? Don't expect it to ever come back. If at this point you're that emotionally charged about it, you don't belong even listening through the rest of these, however many future episodes there happen to be. buck up, reel yourself in, and understand you're no longer a child that needs to react emotionally. You're at war. You're a soldier in combat now. Whether you're ready for it or not, take that approach to life in general. Because that's what life on earth has become. To any cops who made it this far down, okay, let's see. Are you tired of the trauma? Aren't you tired of the soul sickness inherent to the badge? Aren't you tired of looking the other way when your partners break the law? Are you really willing to kill the next George Floyd, the next Breonna Taylor, the next Tamir Rice? How confident are you that your next use of force will be something you're proud of? I'm writing this for you too. It's wrong that what our training did to us. Yeah, it's called the techniques of cults, which I covered last week. It's wrong that they hardened our hearts to our communities, and it's wrong to pretend this is normal. No, that's what has made you immoral pieces of trash. That's why you're immoral trash as police officers. It's to even believe that policing should be done makes someone an immoral piece of trash. That you can't envision that it be done a different way. And no, it is not different than an individual defending themselves. If they only did that when violence occurred, I would say, hey, then they're just acting in the capacity that any other person individual who has these rights. No, they are so-called delegated special rights that other people don't have. And then they get qualified immunity for doing that violence and duress to the public. And they can't be held accountable as individuals. Once again, the reason government and policing cannot exist morally, from a moral philosophical framework, groundwork, perspective, is because no individual can be delegated rights that do not exist for any other individual, for all other individuals. Either you have a right by nature, and it's the same for everyone, and if you do not have a right, you cannot grant that behavior and tell someone else you can do that behavior with impunity. It is axiomatically flawed to think that you can. It is axiomatically, meaning from a foundational standpoint when it comes to philosophy and morality, you cannot delegate a right to anyone else that does not exist for an individual. That's an axiomatic flaw, meaning you are flawed at your foundation, like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And you started building and building and building, and now you have a structure that is not really truly structurally sound. That's what we've built in the world because we have our axiomatic principles completely out of alignment. They're not in harmony with natural law. They're not in harmony with true morality. And then other people think it's just fine, and they think somehow they know a little bit about what's going on in the world when they're actually dunces who haven't looked at the available knowledge. And then they think they know, and they're going to dictate to everybody else. Back to the reading. Look, I wouldn't have been able to hear any of this for much of my life. You reading this now may not be able to hear this yet either. I find the same thing with what on earth is happening. People cannot hear this. They cannot hear what I say. Does not matter. True nonetheless. Not because I said so or because it's my opinion. No, has nothing to do with that. There is objective and absolute truth in nature. And it is our goal as human beings to gather that knowledge, take it into ourselves, and bring our perception into alignment with natural truth. Most people's ego is too big and out of control, and therefore they cannot hear it, and they cannot bring their behavior, their mental processes, and their behavior into alignment with objective truth in nature. The problem has absolutely nothing to do with me as I teach it. The problem has everything to do with others' ego being too inflated and too in the way to receive it. That is why they cannot hear much of what I say. I've had people say, Mark, my ego was so hardened and crystallized, I listened to shows from you and I could not hear them. I had to stop. Experiences had to happen to me in my life. Other knowledge had to come to me in different ways. Finally, I could go back and listen, and then I could hear what you had to say, and you were 100% correct. And generally, the only thing I say to them is, yes, I know that this is how it works. Keep going. Don't stop where you're at. So, continuing with the reading. But do me this one favor. Just think about it. Just turn it over in your mind for a couple of minutes. Yes, and me for a minute. So do the yes and process for a minute. Look around you and think about the kind of world you want to live in. Is it one where an all-powerful stranger with a gun keeps you and your neighbors in line with the fear of death? Or can you picture a world where, as a community, we embrace our most vulnerable, meet their needs, heal their wounds, honor their dignity, and make them family instead of desperate outsiders? Yeah, exactly. That's why policing shouldn't exist at all. That's why government shouldn't exist at all. You know, he stopped short of saying that all government should be abolished. You know, let's see what the person who wrote this thinks about government's existence, not just the police's existence. Okay? If you take only 3 things away from this essay, I hope the third is this: you and your community don't need bastards to thrive. Amen. Amen. Okay? So I agree with about 90% of what this gentleman who wrote this said about it. And then there's 10% I think he has to get clear by going deeper into the world of the occult and the real manipulation game that's being played. I would bet dollars to donuts, ladies and gentlemen, that the individual who wrote this essay knows exactly zero about the world of the occult.